Every time I think I should do work, I'm like, but AI could be doing work for me. The tools don't make the difference. It's the process. So it's process over prompts is really, really important. And you don't need a lot of fancy tools.
If you find the people with the pain and you can get access to that data, you're not even selling anymore. You're consulting and solving problems.
The list is the message. The cohesive unit that data defines is the thing that you say. There's so many breadcrumbs online, but they're everywhere. They're spread out. And to date, we haven't had a way to collect all of that information. The horizontal SaaS company is like, well, what do you do? And it's like, we do a little bit of everything for a little bit of everyone. And this is a real big problem.
Behind the scenes, it was a small group of people that were doing everything.
Welcome back to the GTM podcast. It's your host, Scott Barker.
I want to know how this insane growth actually happened.
Before we dive into today's episode, I want to welcome everyone back from the holidays. Most people know that I am almost always on, regardless of holidays, but I certainly am not checking emails as much as I normally would. I do my best to be present around friends and family. And this year I came back to work and had so many emails in my inbox. The number was pretty terrifying. But since I started using Superhuman last quarter, I was actually able to get back to inbox zero within like 20 minutes. It helps me and the team be so much more productive. Honestly, don't know how I didn't start on Superhuman sooner. I used to be an inbox zero kind of guy, but as my personal media presence, the fund, and our community grew, it became harder and harder to actually make that happen. But I started on Superhuman. It was the most seamless onboarding experience. Everything in my inbox synced within minutes. Superhuman works with your existing Gmail or Outlook accounts. I love to see leaders implementing this kind of best-in-breed solution for their teams, allowing them to simplify and in turn speed up efficiency. I would have loved to have this in my sales days or when I was leading my teams. It would have been an absolute game changer, helping me to better manage emails, to prioritize quick responses, collaborate with other stakeholders, and of course, close deals faster. 2025 is the year of inbox zero for me. If anyone else wants to take back control of their inbox and empower their teams to do so as well, Superhuman is generously offering the GTM Now community exclusive access to 1 month free on the platform. And if you add any teammates in January to your team, they will also get a free month as well. So to join for free, go to superhuman.com/GTM now. That's superhuman.com/GTMNOW. Check out Superhuman at superhuman.com. Hello and welcome back to the GTM podcast. I am a little bit all over the place right now. So if I have some chaotic energy this episode, it's because we just announced our second fund on TechCrunch and they picked this up. So I'm getting a whole bunch of way too kind messages from friends, colleagues, investors, and founders. And so I'll keep my ego in check, but feeling all the love. So thank you everyone for the support. And I have been pumped to get this gentleman on the podcast for a long time. Many of you may have seen him on LinkedIn. I am joined by Jordan Crawford. Welcome, Jordan.
Thanks so much for having me, and congratulations, Scott.
Thank you. It's an exciting milestone, and now it's time to get to work. But this is going to be a really fun episode. So we're going to switch it up a little bit. And, we like to speak through stories, anecdotes. But this one, we're going to make hyper tactical. And there's a few reasons for that. One, we have the right guest to do so. So Jordan Crawford is a go-to-market engineer and advisor for some of the fastest growing companies out there. Think Clay, think Tenor. And really what he's been able to do is switch their thinking from targeting accounts to targeting people using insights backed up by data. And you said something before we hit record. The end result of that is that you craft something, in this case, usually an email, that is so valuable that this receiver would actually pay for it.
Yeah.
And that's a far cry from where we're at today.
I saw that you've raised money. I like money. Can I have your money? That's what that's what most of these messages look like. I'm sure you have some in your inbox. Congratulations on raising the fund. Now that you have money, I would like some of it. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, and then maybe go Bulldogs at the end or whatever mascot
yeah.
It's
like Scott, you're wearing a black shirt. I'm wearing a black shirt. We're basically the same person. And so now that we're the same person, I was wondering what your wallet was doing tomorrow at 10 p.m.
I love it. Well, it's funny because I think I've said this before on the podcast, but when I was leading BDR teams, and you got to, back in the day, you go through your dreaded kind of discovery call to make sure you're qualified for an AE. I would challenge them, and the thought experiment I would have them play is like, I want you to come so prepared to this meeting that 30 minutes, whereas most times it feels like a waste of time, they would actually be comfortable paying you for that time. That's how much I want you to know their business and the insights that we can give them, because we see people in their shoes all day long. And now the ability to automate a lot of that and do that in a written format is now only possible thanks to AI. And that's really been your world. When did you get involved with AI? It seems like you're like at the forefront of everything GTM. Did you have some sort of ChatGPT access early that we didn't know about?
Well, let me do two things first. I'm going to actually read off two of these messages that people would pay to receive, so you understand what bar we're talking about. Because a lot of people talk a lot of game, and I'm going to talk to you about actual messages that I have deployed at scale. But to answer your first question, I have been using the API behind OpenAI, which powers ChatGPT, since GPT 3.0. So I think that might have been September of 2020. I don't remember the exact date, but I have a video of me using some of that stuff in the really early days. And the old sort of trope is that everything is a toy until it's not. And this is kind of the case with ChatGPT. And I also think that people think that you can talk to it like you talk to Google. We've been trained to interact with computers in a certain way, and this just is a new interface, right? It's like, have you ever seen someone that's over, 70 or so, try to interact with the computer? Or the reverse, have you ever tried to reset the timer on your microwave? It's like, in both of those camps, no one can figure out. It's like watching your parents use the iPhone is the most painful thing to see. And you're like, where do I click? I'm like, of course, what you do is you click here, 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 and then you change your battery setting. It's like, that's not really intuitive. And we're having that moment with ChatGPT. But I want to get back to, so I'm going to just read you off two messages that people would pay to receive that I've actually sent.
Love it.
So the first message is to roofing companies. So these are local roofers, basically. And, what do they want to do? They want to sell roofs, right? So basically, we found these roofers and we said, Scott, I don't know if you saw that 123 Main Street, which is just about a mile away from you in Vancouver, just sold. And in the listing description, it mentioned a $10,000 credit for a new roof. I've included the name of the realtor and their email if you'd like to reach out. If you're interested in getting the homeowner's contact information, let me know and we can automate this for you, basically. So it's like your roofer, this is an actual roof that needs to be actually replaced now, where there's actual money allocated, right? You would pay to receive that message. Let me give you another one. This was for a company that was a competitor to Segment. And at the time, Segment had a startup program that basically gave you Segment for free for 2 years. So what we did is we used BuiltWith to look at the install date of Segment. And we found companies that met the startup criteria at the time based on their, we basically could go back in time and say, when did they raise how much money? Were they incorporated at around that time? So we knew that they qualified. That they actually were using the Segment 2-year free startup program. So I could say, Scott, you're 4 months away from a bill that you never expected to receive from Segment, because I don't know if you remember, but in 2016, you probably signed up for the Segment startup program, and that credit is about to expire. based on your traffic and our analysis of Segment's current pricing, you're going to have to pay about $62,000. If you would like, we can instantly switch Segment out for our company's software, and we'll give you 2 more free years. And so that particular message actually generated more business for me than the client, because they're like, we love Segment, we'll just pay for it. But who wrote this message? Which is not a good look. You do not want that to happen. But yeah, that's an example of, these are 2 examples of messages that you would pay.
Those are incredible examples. And, just setting the stage, a little bit, for our listeners, many of whom are running, outbound programs, and you may have 1 or 2 fantastic reps that can go to this depth and breadth of research, but it probably takes them, like 4 hours to write a single, email that's of that quality. And what you're saying is those 2 examples that you just gave, of course, it takes time to set up, which we're going to go through in a little bit. But once you sort of got the right prompts, you've got the right parameters, you understand the business, you understand your personas, this is just going to churn those out, within seconds.
Yeah. This is all programmatic. And this is the thing that people might not understand, is that if you build this process at the company and person level, it informs all of the rest of everything you do. Because unlike intent channels, like G2, Bombora, unlike Google and Facebook, where Facebook is like, we'll just use all the machine learning world and just figure out where you get clicks. Or Google, it's like, you just can pay money for us to bid on, I need B2B SaaS software now. So it's like, okay, great. This is, if you can target the actual person and an actual company that has public data that is indicating that they need you now. And that's not necessarily a hand raise, but it's telling the same story from one segment of customers that bought to this segment. That means that you can go do things like go find their ad IDs and run ads against them. You can run LinkedIn automation sequences. You also can send messages programmatically without people involved, because you have automated the whole process, but you began with an insight. You began with something that someone would pay to receive. So cold email just is this. It's the one way that you can completely change how you go to market, because once you can target at that level of specificity, it can bleed into everything else you do.
Yeah. And what's funny is, there's obviously this kind of pushback from folks on kind of the automated outreach, and this is the death of the SDR, and all of our inboxes are going to just be flooded, and oh my God, we're just doing like more and more and more. But what's interesting about this, if I got one of those messages and you even said at the bottom, this was written by a machine, I wouldn't care, because
this money is written by a machine. Do you want this? Yeah.
Right. It's still valuable. Like I think of like an example in my real life. It's like, my dad, he likes to make a big deal about his birthday every year, and he loves to go to Vegas. And sometimes I forget because I'm busy to book a trip. And if I got an automated email that was hyper contextualized, that was a month out, and saying, hey, based on historical data, you usually take your dad to Vegas. Like, did you get concert tickets? Did you do some stuff? I would be like, amazing. And I don't care if that was a machine that wrote that whole thing.
And also and you're exactly right. But imagine the next step of this, which is, I have reserved all these tickets for you. Just click here, and these 7 things will be bought for you. Like, oh shit. You just have, can we curse on this podcast? Is this a cursey podcast?
We encourage passion. So whatever form that comes out in.
Okay. That's sweet. The next step on this is, I can deploy an AI agent on your behalf. Now, we're not going to talk about that today, but I have in the past, I've actually taken this a step further, which is, Scott, you compete against this company. I have found people that just removed that software. Here are their names and contact information. These are leads that you might want to go chase. And then I could pitch my service then to say, like, you don't have to believe, I don't have to try to convince you I'm the best, the best at X, Y, or Z. I can just say, here's actual value for you, Scott. Here's actual people that you should contact, why you should contact them when they removed X or Y or Z software, based on negative reviews that were done on G2. So this actually gets into a good setup for the argument, which we were talking about a little earlier. And let me kind of launch into why I think a lot of these AI SDRs and a lot of the AI methodology is really wrong. It's because where they are slotting in is a broken paradigm. So I'm going to first describe this old world, and maybe you can help sort of flesh this out for me. In the old world, you basically downloaded a list of accounts, and those accounts had things like industry, employee headcount, headquarters, founded date. You would then get a list of contacts. So I want the VPs of marketing, the CMO, et cetera. Then you would write a persona message. So CMOs typically at technology companies have X or Y or Z problem. We help with problem, et cetera. Then what you would do is you deploy to SDRs to personalize, right? This is where you're like, look, 21-year-old that just graduated, why don't you just talk about Scott's black shirts? You have black shirts. Everyone has black shirts. Do whatever. I don't know. And then just go throw that into a sequence, right? So what's happening is that these AI tools are coming in at the personalization layer. So all of the strategy, everything is really terrible upstream, same broken data, same broken process. And they're like, you know what? You know that horse that you've been riding? We're going to throw a no-legged robot on top of that horse and really just slap it on its ass and get it going. It's like, well, it's no surprise that that doesn't work. So that's kind of how I see the old world today. Does this argument resonate with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of say it all the time. And obviously with GTM being in our name, we see a lot of GTM technology tools that are starting out, and many of them, some of the feedback that we'll give is like, this feels a lot like you're still building for Aaron Ross's like predictable revenue book that we ran for 12 years. That's fundamentally breaking down, and sure, we can do it faster. Sure, we can do it at more volume. Sure, maybe we don't even need a human to run that, but like that world is not working. So why are we building for that world? Yeah.
And the problem in the transition, I think, comes from horizontal SaaS companies. Because if you imagine, and we're actually going to look at a vertical SaaS company for this exact reason, because the horizontal SaaS company is like, well, what do you do? And it's like, we do a little bit of everything for a little bit of everyone. And this is a real big problem because it, like I saw, I'm going to call him he who shall not be named. I won't give away his name, but it is a very well-known CMO on LinkedIn. And he was like, our product just released this brand new, amazing feature, a contact waterfall. I was like, come on, man. Like, this is not news. And this is just one feature that you have. And the way in which he was talking about it was like, oh, you can go on LinkedIn and find someone's contact information. And I was like, so what? Like, how does that help anyone? And so we have a problem because we target multiple personas in multiple industries that use multiple versions of our product. And so what happens is, I remember I was working at a company and they had one SDR that was focused on the oil and gas industry because the company had sold to Chevron. Like, that's it. They had one customer. And so they basically, you know what they equipped him with? They equipped him with a cowboy hat and a can-do attitude. And that's it. And this is a real problem.
So I listened to the gong call of the of how the deal was sold.
Yeah. So he's just like Chevron. Like he's just throwing the case study. It's like, how many times can that SDR send that link? So the hard thing is that when we try to go to market, we're trying to go to market for every segment, every persona, and we're leaving it to the SDR, the BDR, or the AE in some cases to figure it out for their segment. And we're equipping them with no strategy, no insight. The CEO hasn't picked a sub-vertical to sort of focus on. So this is how we transition.
And just to jump in there too, they're also typically our youngest, least tenured folks who have the least amount of business acumen in
Yeah.
tech, let alone trying to figure out how oil and gas works and how to, speak to a pharma CEO, like that
Yeah.
takes
Yeah.
years and years and years and years
Yeah.
to build up that acumen,
Yeah, it's so funny. I was having a call with a friend of mine at Growth, and he's like, "I want to learn about direct mail," and I had to run a direct mail business, and he's like, "What should we send them?" And I said, "Well, have you done any type of like, do you know anything about this buyer?" It's like, "Well, we know that they're bureaucratic." I was like, "Look, just go pay them $500 for 30 minutes, and just ask them like, what do they not like to do?" We were gonna, for one of my portfolio companies, we were going to run a Michelin star dinner. And it's like, I mean, look, I like Michelin star dinners. Like, the more the merrier, right? The more you're going to pay for more Michelin stars for me, I am at that dinner. But the people that we were hosting were like beer and whiskey guys. They're like, look, I'm going to this conference to get away from my spouse. Like, that was the vibe that they, and it's like, I don't want some foo-foo food. Like, I'm not into seafoam, Scott. And so
I really would like a pizza to go and a bottle of whiskey to my room so I can get some alone time, because I never get alone time.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like for that type of person, pitching a Michelin star dinner is hell, right? Like, I don't care if you're paying. This is a trap. It's like, I don't want to eat dinner for 7.5 hours. So let's talk about the new world, and let's talk about how we transition even as a horizontal SaaS company. This is going to be a lot easier for vertical SaaS because you are forced into insights. So, like our mutual friend, Kyle at owner.com, this is, he's built an amazing revenue engine, but this is a lot easier for him transparently, because it's not like he's not selling to restaurants and plumbers and also B2B SaaS companies. He's selling to restaurants. And they have a message. And one of the reasons that they have a message that people will pay to receive is they can go look at the prices. Owner.com is a platform for restaurants to help reduce fees for like delivery as one of the things they do. So they actually can go find out what are you charging on your menu? What are you charging on the Uber Eats menu? What are you charging on the DoorDash menu? Are those deltas? And you can calculate based on the number of views they get, approximately how much money Uber Eats and DoorDash are stealing from you. He wouldn't say it like that, but like how much money you're paying those platforms, right? And the only reason that he can do that is because his CEO says, and also do something for plumbers. So let's talk about how we transition to this new world, and this transition will work for vertical or horizontal SaaS. And what you have to do is you have to do a good thing for the company, but a dangerous thing as a CRO, and it means you have to pick a segment. So you have to go to your CEO and say, look, we need to pick a persona. We need to pick the section of our ICP, the segment of our ICP that is most valuable and where there is great public data to support the inversion of that value, which is just to say, how can we find public indicators that customers are privately struggling with the problems that we solve?
Yeah.
So you pick that
like
segment.
Fear drivers. Like people, they'll keep them up at night. If there's data out there that are driving fear into that persona, that's kind of what you're looking for. Is that fair to say?
It's a great question. The way to think about this is, what are your best, most cohesive unit of buyers? And it might be fear, but it could be straight value, which is like in Kyle's case, he actually can calculate the total amount of money from public data that he could save restaurants. And that means that he has two things. He has a qualified set and a quantified set, which is he can say, is this a qualified account? Yes or no, right? They're not on Uber Eats. They're not on DoorDash, not qualified. And then he can quantify it and say, ooh, your menu prices are $10 and they're $50 on Uber Eats and DoorDash. And also you have 50,000 stars, which basically is correlated with purchasing volume. Just, Amazon is this way too. There's some relationship between number of reviews and revenue. So that means that his segment is people that have X number of orders where there's Y delta, right? So that is what a segment looks like. And the nice thing about defining that segment is then you can say, great, we have a segment now. Now we need to find the data to define it. And it's not industry, Scott, and it's not years in business. It's none of that stuff. It's what is the cohesive unit and how do you find it? And so, like, for example, for a company like Lean Data, who does routing of leads and stuff near their segment is complex sale and lots of volume. So you can imagine, you can't go to Zoom Info, Scott, to find that. But you can imagine that you could say something like, well, do they have mid-market and enterprise reps? Are they getting a lot of traffic? Are they selling a B2C item? Is there a PLG motion, right? And you can imagine an AI agent answering all of those questions. So now we have a segment, right, which is just that cohesive unit. And by the way, you might have 10, 20, 30, 50 segments, but you just start with the cream of the crop. Now you have data and a segment. Well, those two things together, that's the message. I say this all the time, Scott, the list is the message. The cohesive unit that data defines is the thing that you say. And so, you know, in the case of the that's a bad example, but say, when we were running that thing get segment, people are going to get confused because I said the word segment twice, one time capital S, the other time lowercase s. But segment the company, the cohesive unit was who signed up for the startup program that had high web traffic, where they were coming to an end, right? That those three things together allowed me to say something really specifically valuable to them. And I also combined that with interviews that we did of segments customers to tell people what the private market price was so they could negotiate. So now I have a message, and you know what? The message defines the accounts because you now have all of the data, you know the message, and then because you have the data plus the message, the accounts define themselves essentially. And that allows you to scale value. And so if you scale segment by segment, Scott, you can actually start with a message, and you're not trying to dump that responsibility on these 21-year-old SDRs to literally lead with no value and just fight for attention. And that's the difference here in this new process. And in the rest of the pod, I actually want to, if you'll indulge me here, to show you how you can do this. At least how you can build the bones of this system with just ChatGPT and their new feature, Deep Research.
I've been waiting for it. Let's do it. I'm super excited. And just for our listeners, so you should get the gist of this if you are listening just via audio, you know, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen. But this will be on YouTube as well. And so if you're more a visual learner, go check out the YouTube video. We'll put it in the show notes. But I'm super excited. Let's make it happen.
And I will say, I'll do my best to read off these prompts, and I will share this ChatGPT thread with you. If we would have recorded this last week, you would have seen a much more complicated process. So this is how quickly these tools are changing. But as a general matter, I have kind of a principle that that the tools don't make the difference. It's the process. So it's process over prompts is really, really important. And you don't need a lot of fancy tools. We're just going to use ChatGPT, specifically the O3 Mini with Deep Research. You only have access to this if you pay the $200 a month. But I think it's honestly worth it. It sort of blew me away. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with
brand new, this stuff that we're going to talk about.
We're recording on Tuesday, February 4th. I think this was released less than a week ago, maybe last Monday. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the end. So you can actually see what a message looks like, because I think that as the atomic unit is really, really valuable. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the process, which I call the find process. This is part of the go-to-market cannonball series that I'll be launching, which is how do you do a go-to-market motion in an hour? It's what we're trying to do with a friend of mine, Doug Bell. So the find process is focus. So you need to know ICP. We need to identify that segment that we talked about. It's investigate. So how do you go about and find the data for that segment? So the focus is going to help us find the segment that we should focus on. The investigate is going to allow ChatGPT to help us to say, where is that data? Now, remember, with those two things, the N is narrate, right? So we're going to tell a story based on that segment and the data together. And finally, it's deploy, which is once you have all this information, you can then use tools to structure the outputs per channel. That's not just email. That could be cold calling scripts. It could be LinkedIn ads. So I'm going to share my screen now and start with the end result of the message. Now, I should say that I literally finished this like right before you joined. So this message is not something that all of the bones are there, but I wouldn't send this exact message. So just like put that caveat in mind. And I'm going to share my
Hasn't
screen
gone
now.
through the editorial process, we'll call it.
Yeah, exactly. But all of the bones are there to do this. So I'm going to sort of set this up. We're doing this for a company called Gaia.
Shout out Gaia, incredible portfolio company. Shout out Mark Andre, Stephen Farnsworth. They're just absolutely crushing it right now.
It was so great. I was on a call with them. And this is like one of the best moments of my career is someone said, "Oh, I got this great idea. We can use I heard about this fantastic idea. We could use job descriptions." And the guy that was working with him, he's like, "Yeah, where did you get that idea?" And he turned his screen around and it was a YouTube video of me. So I was like, I referenced myself on the sales call and I was like, that is the greatest ever. It's like,
that's awesome.
Jordan up for the win.
Yeah.
So
amazing.
So I love Gaia because the simplest platform to run your ISP, that's Internet Service Provider for, I don't know what you have in Canada, but that's what the acronym is here. And so the nice thing about this is vertical SaaS, which means we do not have to pick a segment. The segment is like, or I should say that we don't have to pick between multiple personas, et cetera. It's like, we know we're targeting ISPs. So customer first approach to telecom operations. So a lot of like, we help you with customer experience, like one place for your customer service reps to get information. We'll increase website conversion rates so people can actually go buy your software, buy the ISP online. Network monitoring. So if there's incidents, we'll help you report with that. Online checkout, so people can just upgrade on their device. Workforce scheduling, so technician efficiency and customer satisfaction. So if you have to send people out to go repair lines, right? And you can like manage your properties in one place. And these guys really know what they're talking about because they came from this world. They ran an ISP, which there is no better, like, this, Scott, the only person you ever want to invest in is someone that actually did the thing. And so
totally.
They have
such an unfair advantage, particularly in vertical software. If you spent time building a company that is in that vertical, like you're light years ahead already.
Yeah, it's so good, right? Because because that they don't like Michelin star dinners, they like whiskey, and just having that insight is incredibly useful. Okay, so let's now pull up the message here. This is to an actual company. This is actually real. Simon, I read that City Fiber had to pause some city builds in Yorkshire and even trim 400 staff to control costs. With 3.5 million premises passed and a goal of 8 million, scaling efficiently is clearly getting harder. Gaia's platform could help you stretch your CapEx further. We use AI to optimize build sequencing. For example, prioritizing areas with faster take-up to start generating revenue, which could fund subsequent builds. We also provide real-time visibility into contractor performance. If a build partner is falling behind or over budget, you'd see it in the dashboard and you could course correct instead of blunt pause that cost a year. In short, we turn your myriad build data into actionable plans to keep the rollout on track despite economic pressures. I'd be happy to share how this worked for another fiber builder facing similar issues.
Wow.
So look, I mean, no one's going to send that exact email. Like, it's a little bit too long. It doesn't exactly connect. But let's talk about the bones of what happened.
The bones are there.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, we are actually talking about a problem that they have, right? We know where the problem is. We know that they've laid off a bunch of people, right? So we have multiple data sources here. We also know how many premises they're paused. So now, this isn't my industry. I don't know what that means. My guess is that they just aren't doing build outs or something yet. And so that they have a problem. And here's the thing, the pitch, you notice how, like, if you go to the website, they could have talked about customer service, right? But that's not that's not the problem that City Fiber has, right? It's like all of the public data said that it is about this Yorkshire thing and that they have some of these issues are paused, right? And by the way, we wrote a lot of these emails. So another one, right? Marwin, I saw that Charter had to hand back 133 rural areas from your RDOF commitments, about 2% of the total. I think these RDF commitments. I think that this is like a federal fund, likely due to high cost or execution hurdles. And the push into rural builds is reportedly nudging other network upgrades out by 6 months. These trade-offs are painful and public. Great line, ChatGPT. Gaia could help Spectrum maximize this build efficiency so you don't have to forfeit opportunities. And then, it goes into a little bit of a pitch here about what they do. We can even flag project at risk of delay so you can address issues before they require returning funds. Scott, these people had to give money back to the government. Everyone knows that is the worst feeling in the world. If charters invest in billions in rural expansion, a data-driven approach to de-risk those builds might be a game changer, which again, ChatGPT, game changer, obviously AI. Shall we discuss how we can support that? So, I talk about this being the world's smartest 12-year-old, and this message is amazing. The bones are there. And now in the next little bit here, I'm going to show you how we get there. But I wanted to pause there so you can ask me questions or talk about sort of what your thoughts are here.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just blowing my mind that this is coming from ChatGPT. And I know if I tried to get ChatGPT to write me something like this, it would not come out this way. So there's obviously, just a ton behind that I'm excited to kind of unwind. But my one question is, and you mentioned you've got this workshop coming up that you truly think you can build like a go-to-market program in an hour.
Yeah.
For these to get to this quality of message, how long do you think total you spent on this?
There are maybe 4 prompts here.
Wow.
And to get, this is like one of my core principles is that process over prompts. The process matters so much more. And actually, you know what? I didn't even write the prompts. I had Claude write the prompts for me. So every time I think I should do work, I'm like, but AI could be doing work for me. So, but before
what do you mean by process over prompts? Break that down a little bit for me.
Yeah, sure. So people will use ChatGPT like they use Google. And Google, you ask a question, Scott, like how big is the Toyota Tacoma? Or you ask these like one-off questions. But let's actually talk about a better way to talk with ChatGPT. I mostly use Claude until this deep research thing. But really what you can say is, I am a CRO. I'm trying to think about the best frameworks to accomplish X goal. List out those frameworks for me, right? So you're warming up the chat. It's like, great, here are the frameworks that humans use to solve that problem, which I would have never known that. And then you say, great, now what I want you to do is I want you to write a prompt that will solve this goal. And then Claude will just go ham. And Claude will be like, oh, okay, well, you need to consider this and consider that and do this. And it's like, oh my gosh, Claude thought of better ways to talk to Claude than I would. And then you can say, great, now do that. And so this is why I talk about this as the world's smartest 12-year-old, is that you need to give it context on your problem. You need to say, well, what question should I ask you? And you can have, so AI is the world's greatest bullshitter. It really, and this is sort of another one of my principles, is that you are the guide, not the river. And so you're there to guide the AI and to be a critic of what it comes back with. And Scott, it's so hard because the bullshit is mixed in with brilliance. And you have to be like, oh, that's bullshit. Like these emails, if you weren't a good editor, you would either A, like send them as is, or B, you might even throw them out instead of saying, ooh, actually, this is good. This is good. Game changer, we need to remove that. That word doesn't really wake anyone up in the morning. Yeah.
Or just tell Claude, no more buzzwords. Can't do buzzwords anymore.
Well, or you could say, Claude, I want to write a message that doesn't sound like any cold outreach ever. I want it to sound like a friend. Help me think through what I would prompt to be able to get a message like that. And then Claude's like, well, you would do blah, blah, blah. It's like, great, now write that prompt, now execute that prompt. Yeah. So let's dive into the actual prompt process here. And I'll walk you through, I'm going to read some of these prompts, but I'm not going to read it all because our listeners would go to sleep. They would ask for a refund.
But if they want to get their hands on some of these prompts, where's the best way to do so?
I'm actually going to, well, two things. I'm going to share this actual GPT chat so that they can access that. I also have an upcoming course called Who to Target and What to Say. It'll be about $1,000, I think. And we'll have like 60 or so of my prompts and the process with which to execute them. But this chat, you guys can just, I'll share and you can just take it.
Love it. Thank you, my friend.
Sure. Okay. So this is like a wall of text. So I'm not going to read it all, but I'm going to talk to you about how I got this wall of text. Basically, the way in which I think about prompts are, what would a human do? So if you were coming in, and maybe Scott, I'll just ask you this question. If you were coming as a CRO into a company, what's like the very first thing that you would do?
I would want to talk to as many customers as I could and talk to as many of my teammates as I could.
And why is that the place that you start?
I need to gain as much information as humanly possible to be able to do my job effectively.
Exactly. This is the first F that we're going over, which is the focus. You need to find this information and you need to focus your efforts on understanding customers, understanding the what the customer says and their reality is where you need to anchor all of your work. And the two people that know that best, of course, are the sellers and the customers. So that's what this prompt basically does. It's like, go find the market position. Figure out where is their market position? What's their current customer reality? Go map out the buying journey and decision-making process, which I had never even thought about asking. What's the competitive landscape? So go in user forums and social media, right? Again, I asked Claude to create this. I can zoom in. Every time I see someone like leaning into their screen, I'm like, I need to zoom in.
See how my nose hair's up. It's truly fascinating. And it's like, it's surprising when you let your mind expand how much public data there actually is. It's just not sitting on your typical platform that you go by and have access to.
And Scott, this is a great point because think about this. There's so many breadcrumbs online, but they're everywhere. They're spread out. And to date, we haven't had a way to collect all of that information. And even the best AI agents of today, like I sell a $300 course on how to build AI agents. And even those AI agents have to be ultra specific and broken down into very small steps. So you can't ask an AI agent, go to market for me. You have to ask it a question like, what is Scott's last name? Something like ultra specific. Okay, let's dive back in. Competitive landscape. So where do they exist relative to their competitors? Market context and dynamics. So what's the market forces of targeting their customers, right? We had talked about things like federal funds, which, I didn't even know that there were federal funds for ISPs. That makes a lot of sense. What are their customer success patterns? So what defines a customer success, like a really great, happy customers? Have they talked at all about their own go-to-market execution? So maybe they've talked on LinkedIn and made posts to say, here's how we're doing it. And then please provide specific evidence, direct quotes, data points. So this is why I did not write this. I asked Claude to write it with my goal in mind. And I basically said, yo, Claude, I have another AI agent whose name shall remain nameless because I didn't want to tell Claude that I was cheating. I was cheating on her with ChatGPT, which is very important.
Does it get angry? Did it have some emotion built in just for fun that it gets bugged?
Well, actually, the funny thing is that there was some research done relatively recently that said that emotion improves the quality. So I always say, like, my job is on the line. I like do this. And so I just joke that once artificial superintelligence comes, it's going to come for me first. Like, here lies Jordan Crawford. He should not have said those things to AI, right? Like, that'll be on my tombstone. Okay. So one of the things that AI does, which, by the way, this is the only model I've seen that does this, and you should adopt this in your process. It's ask me questions. So, the models, the primary way in which these models respond is hold my beer. And so you can ask it a question that you say, great, but tell me exactly if I were to walk to the moon, how many steps I would take. It's not going to say, this is a crazy thing. Maybe you like, how big are your strides, right? Like how fast can you breathe? Can you breathe in space, right? But this new, I'm using O3 Mini High, and I clicked the deep research, and it said, are you looking for high level strategic overview, or do you want granular details? I'm like, oh, great. I didn't tell you that. I want granular details. It's like, do you need a historical perspective? I'm like, no, I don't care what they did in the past. I'm selling to today's market. Do you have competitors in mind? Now, if I did my work and I was internal, I would be like, I do have competitors in mind. Look at this. Any particular industry or region? And I was like, I don't know. Who do they focus on? Go to their website and determine that. And then this is amazing. Strategic intent. Are you looking at them as a competitor, partner, investment, or acquisition target? And I was like, none of these. I'm actually trying to build a go-to-market strategy for them, right? So knowing the intent is so key. And because I outsourced my prompt to Claude, ChatGPT is like, Claude didn't really do a good job here. And so it's like, great. So I just used a tool called Super Whisper. So it's basically, you can talk in, I can say hello to Scott for me. And it can, oops, I wasn't in the field. Say hello to Scott for me. So I just talk, and it just will. So that's what I did. I said, I don't need time sensitivity. So I just said all the things that I said, and it said, great. Research completed in 16 minutes with 24 sources, Scott. Like, go find me one BDR that's ever done that.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to like,
because it's almost like it's the going back to your example of like, hey, you're a CRO. What is the first thing that you're doing? You go in and you've got all your other executives around the table, and you're like, all right, how's the business going? Well, each one of them are going to ask you a series of questions like, what do you actually mean by that? Do you want to know how our churn rate is looking? Do you want to know how, what our CAC is? Like, they're all going to give you these different things. And then, then they're going to define that. It's going to take them a lot longer than this. And then they're going to go find and pull all the reports and everything. And then maybe like 3 months later, you're somewhat up to speed.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And this is how we have conversation, right? People will say ridiculous things, and you'll be like, what ridiculous things specifically do you mean? It's like, I mean, this ridiculous thing. It's like, oh, that was a different type of ridiculousness than I thought, So that's kind of how we work in conversation, right? No one just... you would be pretty insane if you just tried to answer that question, right? People would look at you like the question is bad. So you have to format a better question so that you don't provide a 10-minute. I was on a call today that was exactly like that, where I was like, here's what we can do. Is bad sales, I guess. But I was like, we can do this thing with these. And I was like, check out this rock. This is the greatest rock. And he's like, Jordan, I'm in the market for an orange juice. I was like, oh, why did I just talk for like 20 minutes? Jesus. This is terrible. So that's what we're doing. We're on the focus thing, which is like, where do we focus? And so this is like a chef identifying their signature dish. Where should Gaia focus? So basically it's like, look, okay, is ISP, this is like regional providers. It goes into, it's like, oh, great. Like they sell into Canada. Here's the current systems and workflows. This is like too much. This is a deranged amount of text. So I'm not going to like read through all this, but I'll read through the headers, sort of pain industry, right? And it's actually citing the website here. It's actually giving quotes, right? A Canadian ISP found its original sign-up process so cumbersome that only 20 customers per day completed it. They later transferred into an e-commerce style online checkout and saw signups jump 6x to 120 a day. That is amazing. And this is just on their case studies page, but the power of this sentence is incredible because remember, this is a segment that we can back into data. You can use a tool like SimilarWeb to find traffic. So you can score all of the ISPs in the country using SimilarWeb, and you can say, great, I know that you have X. And by the way, you can find their form, Scott. You can find their sign up form, and you can see if it looked like this Canadian ISP. So you can feed in that form that this Canadian ISP had before, and you could say, this is why it sucked, and here's our form, and this is why ours doesn't suck. And you can deploy an AI agent out in the world to all of those things for about half a penny a row and say, go find me all of the ones, again, segment, go find me all of the individual companies with really, really shitty forms. And so I would have never thought about that if I hadn't had this summary. But let's like continue on. You don't have to be, I mean, I see this because I've been doing this since like 2016. My business is 4 years old, but I have been doing go-to-market engineering stuff for a long time.
I will just say, if you're not on YouTube, go to YouTube right now, because it is genuinely blowing my mind.
Okay, so let's keep going with this. You're going to be able to get the full chat, but I'm just going to kind of read off the sections in this focus section. And the focus, again, really is about understanding all of the context that, Scott, we were talking about that a CRO would need before. You're not going to go into day one and say, send this email out. This is like ridiculous, right? So we like market position, so how they position themselves. So I said, like, what are some triggering events? So like, when do these ISPs actually like look for things? What is the research and consideration? So how are people evaluating this? And it's like saying like, look, one community broadband leader, AU Wireless, described that they reviewed a wide range of solutions and compared all major vendors. And they had specific criteria, which is billing and support, a better ticketing system, reducing workload. So this just like found a random place on the internet about a buying choice. Like, you would never do that, right? Like, there's a community, like, what software would you guys recommend day to day? So this is like a Reddit thread. And they said, great, like, here's like the pros and cons of each. Here's a user that tried several systems. We switched, like, better software and better support. So this just goes on and on and on. And I'll just kind of keep scrolling, but buying committee and decision factors, implementation risks, what are feature gaps? How do people think about vendors? What are the competitive landscape? Like, it overviewed what people think of their competitors and how all their competitors are charging based on like random Reddit threads, right? And this power code, so it goes on and on. And their website. I will
say, anyone who is looking for a new job, also run these exact prompts, and you'll be the greatest interviewer that has ever existed at their company.
Well, and Scott, it's a great point, because you can do this, and you can, and if you're applying for an SDR job, you actually could write an email. You could get a customer and start your SDR job with a customer and say, hey, Scott, I know you're hiring for the go-to-market fund. I'd like to work as an SDR fund for you. And I have found a company that I think that would be a perfect investment for you. They want to chat. Like, that will blow people's mind, right? Like, which SDR has ever come in with a lead in tow? And you could kind of do that. I mean, I don't know anything about Gaia, and I could do that with this process. So anyways, this goes on, like other competitors, other solutions, customer perceptions of Gaia, which is great, feedback on competitors. So like broadband trends. So what's happening? What are the regulatory and technological shifts, right? ISPs are great for this, because if the government mandates you do something, that's a great segment to start with. So anyways, this just like goes on and on. And this is really important because this sort of warms up the model here. So it really brings all of the context of the model. And by the way, you can copy and paste this into Claude, because this output, I think O1 Pro can give you 100,000 tokens as an output, which tokens are just portion. You could think about them like words. And Claude can take in 200,000 tokens at any given time. So you can just paste this into any other model that you want. Anyways, messaging, positioning, pricing, and packaging, it goes on and on and on and on. And we'll share this with you. So global expansion tactics, information gaps, right? Here's like, oh, basically, this is amazing. It's like, look, there's some information that we don't know. You need some primary research. So now ChatGPT is like telling me to do my job. It's like, Jordan, you didn't do your job. You need to go like learn a little bit more. So great. So we've done the focus piece now, but now we need to kind of investigate. We need to investigate data sources. So I have this prompt called the SAT method, and it stands for sort of scale and coverage. So we're talking about data sources. So the investigate is really, how do you source the finest ingredients? And in this case, it is the data. And I built this prompt with Claude, and it is a methodology to get scale and coverage, access and structure, and targeting power. So let me break down what that means. You could think about ZoomInfo, right? ZoomInfo has scale, sure. Access and structure would score low because you got to pay for it. and the targeting power would be low. So for Gaia, the most thing that ZoomInfo is probably, and I don't mean to pick on them, they just, they don't focus on this particular niche. And most data providers that B2B companies have don't focus on a niche. So the targeting power of ZoomInfo would be low because we can't determine things like, who is a bad sign up form, right? ZoomInfo doesn't tell us that. Apollo doesn't tell us that. So this whole investigate piece is like, here's exactly how I want you to score this. And I did, again, I said, deep research. The first thing that deep research does is it asks me, what's the primary use case? Like, what's the geographic scope? Which is amazing because Gaia does target internationally. What's the industry focus? Are you looking for free or publicly available data sets or paid? I was like, yeah, I want free. I always want free. So I talked a little bit and I said, great, here's what I want. So I gave it answers to that. And then it says, great. It spent 7 minutes looking for sources. And it said, great, we've got an idea. It's like the FCC broadband deployment data. So the national broadband map, good old Form 477, your best friend and mine, Form 477. Wake up in the morning and you're like, I get to fill out Form 477. So goes through a bunch of data providers, Canadian ISP, Intel broadband provider. So just a ungodly number of providers here. And as it gets to the end, like, oh, speed intelligence, right? So if I know how fast your network is going, that probably has huge implications for any variety of tools and technologies that you're going to need. So anyways, we don't have to go, it even talks about like ZoomInfo, and it's like, here's like where ZoomInfo is good, but it's not going to get you A, B, C, or D. So we got focus and investigate. And remember, you can always listen to this on slower speeds if I'm jamming too much. Okay, great. Now we're going to talk about Narrate. So I said, look, I want you to do is tell me how I should configure these data sets or which columns of enrichment would allow me to message portions of this list in a different way. So it's like, great, let's evaluate the data sets. So what we're doing now is we're trying to figure out how does the data connect with the message. So we've done focus, which is figuring out exactly who to target. Investigate is like, where do I find that data? And narrate is describing the focus and investigate stages. So it's like, great, we can look at these regulatory data sets. We can look at the subscriber count, which they're required to report on. We can look at revenue per employee. So we can sort of run that math and say, oh, they're not very effective because they have a bunch of, their reported revenue is low relative to their employees. Speed test data. So what's their latency, which means they're probably working on things, which has implications for are they sending real people out in the real world to do real work? So it's like, oh, great, high growth, mid-size, and ISPs, which is a reasonable thing. But I said, no. I want you to structure this, Scott, by problem, not by what am I going to say to a mid-market ISP? And so, great. I said, do pain point segmentation, right? So high growth does not work as well as customer service struggles, right? I'm going to say different things to a company that has customer service struggles versus network performance issues, right? So I can tailor my pitch to the exact feature that Gaia offers based on the public problems. So I talked a little bit more and it said, great, now it's going to navigate sources for customer service struggles, network performance issues, regulatory compliance, and infrastructure expansion challenges, which means these are segments, Scott. And I didn't even pick them. I let ChatGPT identify them. So it basically said, we're going to do this for 4 segments. And then, of course, I said to ChatGPT, remember, I don't do work. You do work for me. Will you do my work for me? And ChatGPT is like, hold my beer. So it researched, spent 8 minutes here. It looked at 21 sources. And it said, great, here's exactly where I would find that. Better Business Bureau. I would look at like Ofcom in the UK and CCTS in Canada are prime examples. They they report on telecom complaints per 100,000 users. So they actually tell you how bad people hate a service, which is amazing.
You know what's funny, Jordan? I gotta jump in because so I kind of like, and this is way oversimplifying your incredible method here, but my first BDR job ever, I won all the to be the number one SDR in my first month, and it was not because I was exceptional in any way. I stumbled basically upon this. We were selling payment processing software, And no one in the company had thought to look up the new business registry. We'd create random lists, and then we would try and get them to switch. And I found these lists everywhere that were new business registries, and they needed new payment processing because they didn't have one yet. And so it's kind of the same idea. If you find the people with the pain and you can get access to that data, you're not even selling anymore. You're consulting and solving problems.
That's exactly right. So anyways, it goes on and on, right? How do these map in? Network performance issues? Well, speed, performance, and data. Outage trackers, so you can see how often are they down. So when exactly are those outages occurring? So it just goes on. Regulatory compliance. So here's like the FCC actually report on enforcement news and when they penalize providers, right? So pretty amazing. Like the FCC fined a small ISP in Ohio $10,000 for falsely reporting its broadband coverage. Sounds like that was a farce. Legal databases. So it just goes on and on and on. And there's a bunch of really great things like, okay, well, how does this help us? Let's like keep going down because we'll share this. And it's like, great. What do we do now? I said, great. Now what I actually want you to do is go find actual real customers that are in that bucket. Go tell me exactly who they are. What's like name 5, go find the data that there means a good fit. And so it's like, great, I'm going to find the data that validates which they belong in the pain point segment. I'm going to identify the right decision maker and write a data backed message. Like this thing just did your job. I just did my job. I should apply as a SDR for Gaia. So it's like, oh, look, Tom. By the way, I love Tom. Tom always helps me. If you ever have a Comcast problem, just Google contact Tom Karzanchak or something. And that's like the best way to get any Comcast problem. You can write his office directly. So
is that a serious thing, actually?
Yeah, it's a real thing. So if you ever had Comcast, like it's like contact the office of like their customer experience. So it's like, hey, I saw, though you're never going to say this, I saw customers rating of just 1.3 stars with commented about broken support. That's a massive red flag. See, this is where good editing, you never want to attack the people that's going to pay you, right? Yeah. So this is an example, like one client complains by 30% in 6 months, right? This is where you're never going to say something like this.
Mm-hmm. But they know the problem exists, and now you know the problem exists. So you don't have to draw attention to it necessarily, but it is incredibly helpful information. Like what type of products you're going to pitch, how you're going to pitch the solutions.
I mean, like, look at this. Like in 2019, your customer monthly churn spiked to 2.24%, far above industry norms. Reviews frequently cite customer service as trash and unresolved issues. So it's like, great. The data caught my eye. One of the worst in telecom. Like you would never do that, but this tells many customers feel burned. But you can see that this is actually taking a data about a thing that's happening, adding Gaia's pitch that is relevant to that exact problem. And, in this case, it's a relatively small ask. So you can see we are not going to get to the deploy with apologies to Matt Damon that we have to end this. We're not going to get to the deploy. I haven't actually done this yet, but the deploy piece is really how do you structure this for multiple channels? So it's a really simple thing. You just can say, yo, ChatGPT, I want to deploy this type of messaging to a bunch of different channels. And you're going to use some tools to do this. But that's kind of the process.
Man, well, I have a feeling that we're going to have you back because that was incredible. And I get asked all the time, what's the future of outbound? What is working? And what you just showed me there is unequivocally the future of outbound. And it's really cool. And, you're really on the cutting edge of this stuff. And I'm excited for you to build more frameworks and share with the world. I would suggest everyone listening to this, go follow this guy on LinkedIn. Blueprintgtm.com is your website as well.
Yeah. And LinkedIn, it's just linkedin.com/in/Jordan Crawford. And I do have a YouTube channel too, which you can see a lot of shenanigans on there.
I love it. Well, I appreciate you, man. Appreciate you being a part of the fund and sharing that big old brain of yours with us. And, for our listeners, I know that was, probably a lot to absorb. I would go through that one a few different times, but definitely something to get your whole team around and talk about this. This is the future. And, I say it every week, listening's one thing, executing something totally different. Hopefully you actually put these into action, and we'll see you all next week.
Yeah. And one thing I want to say is that the Go-to-Market Fund is the greatest group of operators that I've ever had the privilege to hang around with and to chat with. And the retreats are just incredible. I had one company that I advise say to me, they are the most valuable investor on my cap table, and they aren't even on my cap table. And so I know this to be very true. So if you can take their money, it is the best money that you can take. And they're one of the just greatest group of folks. So I suggest that you do all you can to get involved. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you very much, man. Really, really appreciate that. And I have a feeling I know who that company is, and it will forever hurt my heart that we didn't get in there earlier. But we'll support them no matter what. Appreciate you, Jordan. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you in person soon.
All right, thanks, Scott. Yeah, me too. Bye.